Peace and love, y'all. Let's talk about the significance of racial and ethnic consciousness to anti so called racist resistance. I say so called because the only race is the human race divided into nationalities. A case study on the Moorish Science Temple of America introduction. While many people are familiar with the contributions of so called black nationalist groups, I say so called black because my hair is black, but I ain't black and I ain't colorblind. And I ain't never seen a black man a day in my life. And my eyebrows is black. My skin ain't black. I ain't black. So that's black is an adjective. It's not even a noun. And the word don't even go back before the 12th century. So that's why I say so-called. But while many people are familiar with the contributions of black nationalist groups like the Nation of Islam, NOI, and the Black Panther Party, few know the significance of the group that helped spearheaded the nationalist movement in the United States. The Moorish Science Temple of America was founded by Noble Drew Ali in the early part of the 20th century. What made the MSTA significant was their blood presentation of self during a time of intense racial oppression and mistreatment of so-called blacks. The MSTA was a religious group catering to black Americans in numerous northern cities. All right, in the 1920s. Now, they say it was a religious group. Noble Drew Ali was teaching civics, not just no religion and nationality and government structure. So he was teaching law and government and nationality and international law and telling us to enforce our national constitution since 1774. So when they say that, it's not correct. So I got to correct that. So it wasn't just religion. And what most people think religion is, they don't even know. They got dogma, not religion. So what made the MSTA significant was their bold presentation of self during a time of intense racial oppression and mistreatment of blacks. The MSTA was a religious group catering to black Americans in numerous northern cities in the 1920s. As a minority group, they were able to create a space for themselves amid the oppression of the major white culture. Few scholars have acknowledged the important part Noble Drew Ali played in cultivating a sense of pride held by many black people in the United States and Canada to this very day. However, by virtue of his disproportionate impact, Ali should be understood as a principal architect of early 20th century black social thought and movement. The Moorish Science Temple of America was the first group to offer congregants an alternative to the stifling reality of the urban North by fashioning a distant conception of Black American identity at odds with both the dominant notions of Black worth as well as those advanced by more well known Black nationalists of the day. It is this influence that inspires the following questions. How did the resistance theories of the Moorish Science Temple of America position the organization in relation to the dominant political and social rhetoric of black worthlessness and inferiority? And what can the practices of the Moorish Science Temple of America teach us about the significance of racial and ethnic consciousness, the anti-racist resistance? Drew Ali and the Moors. The Moorish Science Temple of America was founded by a man named Timothy Drew, who later came to be known as Prophet Noble Drew Ali. The first temple was established in 1913 under the title of the Canaanite Temple and the subsequent Moorish Holy Temple of Science. The organization was established during the time of Garveyism, a movement named after Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the second founder and president of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA. Under Garveyism, Negro and black people were encouraged to denounce their emancipation titles and identity. He asserted that only by doing this would free men be able to recognize their disenfranchisement, lynching, and utter disrespect as crimes committed by European Americans. Noble Drew Ali carried on Garvey's message by declaring that so-called Negroes possessed a distinctive nationality. He declared that they were not what their oppressors claimed them to be, but were in fact Moorish Americans, descended from the ancient Moabites. Any thorough review of the history of Near Asian lands would reveal such places as Canaan and Moab, modern day Morocco, extinctions of what we now call the African continent. Distorted history has attempted to deny the Africanity of those known throughout history as Moors in the interest of Eurocentrism's pig, pigmentocratic status quo, which implies that one's political power and social worth are directly related to the lightness of their complexion. This same deception was used by European Americans during and after slavery to justify their abuse and oppression of blacks. The teachings of the MSTA stress the importance of Black Americans creating an identity separate from the European American construction of Blackness that has specifically to do with being both Black and American, particularly if one was also from the South. Noble Drew Ali taught that if Black Americans embraced their true Moorish nationality, as he termed it, the U.S. government under which they lived and all other nations would respect them and could regard them as a dignified people with a history that merited respect. In 1790, there in one such documented instance of so-called Negroes and slaves using their Moorish nationality to gain their freedom. The Sundry Free Moors Act of 1790 was the legislation passed by the House in South Carolina after four African couples who were brought to America and enslaved argued that they were in fact subjects of a prince in alliance with the U.S. Under their petition, they claimed some years past they had the misfortune while fighting in the defense of their country to be captured with their wives and made prisoners of war by one of the kings of Africa, that a certain Captain Clark had them delivered to him on a promise that they should be redeemed by the emperor of the Moroccan ambassador, then residing in England, in order to have them returned to their own country, instead of which he brought them to this state and sold them for slaves. Since only Negroes could be slaves under the Negro Act of 1740, and skin color was prima facie evidence of Negro identity, we can confidently conclude that the Moors in question were phenotypically Africoid. Their enslavement in the U.S. was a direct violation of Chapter 1, Section 4 of the Negro Act of 1740, which states, the term Negro is confined to slave Africans, the ancient Berbers, and their descendants. It does not embrace the free inhabitants of African, such as the Egyptians, Moors, bolded for emphasis, or the Negro Asiatics, such as the Lascars. The petitioners argued that under their Moorish nationality, they may not be considered as a subject to a law of this state now in force called the Negro Law. But if they should unfortunately be guilty of any crime or misdemeanor against the laws of land, that they may have a just trial by a lawful jury. Their authentic designation as Moors exempted them from being slaves along with the punishment of oppressive. Hold on, we're going to get that back because I'm going to start this up on IG and we're going to go right back in. Their authentic designation as Moors exempted them from being slaves along with the punishment of oppressive laws that constrain the lives. Let's get it back from right up here. The term Negro is confined to the ancient Berbers, and their descendants. It does not embrace the term Negro is confined to slave Africans, the ancient Berbers, and their descendants. It does inhabitants of African, such as the Egyptians, Moors,